Just put it on specially for you.
Right. Well, here we are. Here we are. Welcome, everyone, to I think this is our 12th conversation. You'll all be extremely sad to know that this is going to be our last for a little while. We will be back, but this is going to be our last just for a little while. But welcome. This is English Touring Operas in Conversation with series. My name is Bradley Travis, and I will be joined by our director, James Conway. But I'm delighted that my good friend and director and choreographer, Liam Steele, is with us this evening. Good evening, Liam.
Good evening, Bradley.
It's so good to see you. Now, I'm going to embarrass you slightly because, not really actually, but I'm just going to run through all of the productions that you're probably going to correct me, but that I think you've been involved with ETO. So I think you started in 2007 with Country Matters. Is that right? Linfelder the Loser.
It is, yeah. See, I had to check these as well, so I can
okay, you've got a list too. Okay, yeah. Great. And then we went to Magic Flute in 2009.
Yeah.
And then I think you were acting as choreographer to James in 2009 with Teseo. Is that right?
That was the same time.
That was the same time as Magic Flute. That's right. Yeah. And
I just popped into his rehearsals. It wasn't really acting as a choreographer.
It was very grand.
It was James running in going, "Oh, I've got this. Can you just pop in?" Like.
And then we've got the first time Janice Geeky in 2011.
Yeah.
And also at the same time popping in to see Tim in Fantastic Mr. Fox.
Very true, yeah.
And then we've got 2014 revival of Magic Flute and Paul Bunyan in the season that we spoke about a few weeks ago with the Olivier Award-winning season. And then in 2017 we have Patience, where we first met. And we worked together. And then in 2018, the recent revival of Janice Geeky. Have I got it right?
I think that's, yeah.
Do I get the prize?
Yeah. That's good. James has kept me in work for the last 13 years.
Bloody hell, Liam. You might as well move in. I didn't know. I never pieced together that it was so many.
No. When you hear them reeled off like that, it is quite a lot, isn't it?
Yeah, and there wasn't a dud. It's quite remarkable though, because one has duds.
Yeah.
It's out of one's control half the blooming time. But
we had a
well done you. Congratulations.
Close shaves, I'm sure.
Oh, you have really been a very important part of ETO. But you have been such an important part of ETO since I came.
When did you start, James?
2002.
Okay. So
terrible long time ago. I'm practically a caveman. But yes, we were in Vauxhall at that stage, or Kennington or something like that. Any old how. I heard about you from a designer with whom I had first worked in 90 something, Joanna Parker, who had been a dancer and then became a designer. She's a very well-known designer now. I worked with her, I think, on her first operas. And I'm always asking people, who could direct an opera? Who'd be any good at that? Because I'm not. Touring opera is a special thing. Like touring theatre, I suppose. It's not cheaper or more cheerful or anything like that. It's just a little bit different because, well, I don't know. It's probably not based on stars, and it is based on performance so much of the time. And it's quite a peculiar person that does a good job on it, I think. Particular person, not peculiar. You're not peculiar, Liam. Particular. But anyway, I'm always asking people, and Joe's quite spiritual and all, as well as being practical. And she just said to me, "Oh, you must meet Liam Steele. He's a polymath." And when I heard that, I thought, ooh, polymath, no less. That sounds good. Does that mean he could solve sort of calculus problems while he's on a break, or is he a chess master, or what is it that makes him a polymath? She said polymath, and I think we met. Did we meet just once or something? And I asked you to do Country Matters.
I think so. Yeah, I remember coming into the office and stuff. Yeah, and and it was just I felt incredibly flattered that you'd even asked me in, because it was like, and I think like sort of praise on you, James. I think one of the most incredible things about you is you do take chances on people, and you don't fit that thing about, oh, opera directors. These are people who direct opera, and so these are the people we work with. And I think like people like me, and I know you've done it with other directors as well, that you go, I like who that person is. I like the work that they're doing elsewhere. I think they could do a good job on an opera. And yeah, so very related, but thank you for taking on the chance on me back all those years.
Really, it was my privilege. And I wanted just to approach this now to avoid any more praise of me and to concentrate on you. So you started out as a dancer, didn't you, Liam?
No, I started out as an actor.
Actor?
Yeah. I originally started out as an actor, and well, yes and no. Actually, I trained as an actor, and then sort of moved into dance. I like one of my first jobs out of college. I thought I need to get experience of doing auditions, and this audition came up for this dance company up in Lancaster. So I thought I'm going to go along to really push myself out of my comfort zone and do something that I know that I'll never stand a chance of getting. So I went for this job and got it, which was the most terrifying thing, because I was suddenly like, one of those things like being an opera. I'm not an opera director. It was a thing about, I'm not a dancer. And so sort of ended up in this company up in Lancaster, Ludus, which a lot of people that have sort of worked in sort of the world of physical theatre, like Wendy Houston and Nigel Charnock and Lloyd and stuff, all went through this company. They were like a dance and education company at the time, but devised work, and it was that sort of world of, because you're making dance theatre for young kids, it's like storytelling, and that has to be very, very clear. So I did. So one of my first jobs was as a dancer, and then I sort of went back into acting again, and then I was there at the very beginning of that whole birth of physical theatre. So, then worked with Complicité, which is when I met Joanna.
Yes, that's right. She was designing for Complicité then, wasn't she?
Yeah, and that's where we met. So Complicité.
Funny how that's become a sort of brand of excellence. Oh, worked with Complicité, and a number of people who worked with Complicité have gone into opera. I think, in fact, that's quite unsurprising when you think of the work.
Simon's been doing it, hasn't he now? So
he has, yeah. So it's unsurprising when you see the work that they should have gone that way. But how did you then get your own dance company?
Well, I ended up with a company called DV8 for 8-9 years, and then worked in the company. There was another guy, Rob Tanyan, who was a fellow performer, and we sort of decided, it was actually the producer for DV8 at the time said, you two should set up a company together. And so we were like, ooh. And then I thought about it some more, and someone approached me with an idea for a piece based on the Soho bomber. Remember the guy, I can't remember his name now, but basically sort of planted those series of bombs, and the last bomb he planted was in the Admiral Duncan in Soho, the nail bomber. And we sort of, I was like, talked to him about this piece, and we just went, there's a good idea here. And so I was always fascinated by that mixture of movement and text, and no one was really doing it. People, like I'd worked with Frantic Assembly quite a few times, and it was very much like there was like the movement sections and then the text sections, and no one was really trying to push the sort of form of pulling the two together. So that was the challenge that we set ourselves to, actually sort of create a dance piece and a play, but not necessarily the same, that you could have two languages going on at the same time.
I remember the piece, very strong.
That was the first piece we did, yeah, Sinner. Yeah, and that was sort of, and it's interesting now sort of looking at opera and why I love working in opera so much. And I think it's like all those those sort of ley lines coming together in lots of ways in terms of, and the thing about opera for me is that thing that it's like we say, the polymath thing. It's like I'm fascinated by design, I'm fascinated by images on stage in terms of how we tell story through the images that we make on stage. And I'm always a great believer that if I'm in terms of opera, that if I don't understand a word of that opera on stage, I should still know what the story is, if the storytelling is clear in those pictures. And I think we have, for me, I have a duty to be able to do that. And so sort of that sort of physical theatre world and sort of my passion for music in all forms and that sort of visual storytelling, it's sort of, when I first did probably Country Matters or Infidelity to Lucia, it was like, oh, this feels like I've come home in some way. It really felt like a sort of pulling together of lots of disparate sort of parts of my career, really.
And it was the first time, of course, I've matched you up with a number of designers, and I've taken your suggestions as well, but you are complicated for a designer.
I'm more than complicated. I always say to a designer at the first meeting, I'm hard. Look, trust me, I'm hard, because
yes, you're hard.
I'm a frustrated designer.
You're a nightmare. Yeah, because you're a frustrated designer.
Yeah,
that's right. And I mean, every director really does a lot of design. I think people have an idea that the disciplines are very separate and that productions come together in very separate ways. They have no idea of, I think I've been working for nearly a year on the next show I'm doing with the designer in the course of meetings. And sometimes, directors feel like, well, you give them the idea and they just bloom and well draw it up. And then other times it's not like that at all. In fact, I mean, the best thing is if you have ideas and the designer's ideas are so much better than yours that they take them to a whole other place. And it's kind of surprising and uncomfortable for a while. But I should have matched you and Joanna up sometime, because you would have tormented each other very suitably, and it would have been lovely to watch the torture, because she's a marvelous designer, but it takes a while to get there, and she says all the time how difficult it is. And I mean, it is difficult, or it's not difficult, depending on how you look at it. But that would have been a good thing. But matching you up with Adam, who I think was quite shy then, he's really one of my favorite designers. I think he is a real poet. And when he speaks clearly in the design, he makes art. But when we directors lean on him too much, he makes shows. And you can tell the difference sometimes. Anyway, I can't remember how that collaboration went, but it must have been so hard for him working with, we didn't know each other particularly well, although I think we liked each other from the word go, and we were always supportive. You've always been so supportive to me, right down to lending me your inhaler when I was having an asthma attack in rehearsal and didn't have an inhaler. That was scary too. I remember that was in Bermondsey. But doing Tesio, which was so particular, inspired by Dutch painting piece, and then Country Matters, and that would have been challenging for you. I'm possibly oversharing, but I did the translation, didn't I? I think I did. Yes, I did. Did I? I think I did.
I don't think you're credited as it.
Wasn't I? Oh, maybe I did the other one then. Not that, but I'd done it. It was my first opera as an artistic director in Ireland, in very troubled circumstances. And I had to find a piece that could be done for certain voice types.
Which was Tesio or L'Infidelity de Lucia?
L'Infidelity de Lucia. Right. Country Matters. I commissioned the translation. That's what it was, from a dear friend of mine who's dead. Yes, that's right. And he thought he'd never get away with the title Country Matters because everyone would know that it meant sex because of the reference to Hamlet. And I don't think anybody knew it or anyone ever noticed it. Anyhow, I'm talking too much about it.
Are you frozen, James?
A little bit frozen.
Cut. I put together the musical edition, everything like that. Oh, am I frozen?
But you're back now.
Sorry.
You're back.
But anyway, I knew the piece very well. That's a kind of, it's a difficulty for another director when the producer stroke artistic director knows the piece too well. I find it a really complicated time when you're choosing rep, and in order to choose it, you have to really know the piece well enough to know that the company could make a success of it. And then looking, either you've chosen it with someone in mind, as I did when we did Magic Flute, or there comes a point when you release it and just have to be critical, but you also have to be positive and supportive. And I think anyway, that must have been a challenging one, because I bet you I was nosing into the rehearsal room wondering what the hell was going on and how you were treating my baby in there.
You were probably, out of all of them, which I completely understood as well, out of all of them, that was the one that you probably were most concerned in terms of but that was sort of understandable as well, because it was my first opera. I remember having a conversation. I remember this conversation I had. I remember it so distinctly because I put the phone going, well, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm doing. And I was in a car park in Stratford, and you rang me to talk about the costumes, and you're going, they need colour. And I'm going, but they're very different shapes. And so you're going, no, I know my audience, like they say, I like the one in the blue dress. Why don't they just say I like the one in the big skirt instead?
I was right, Liam.
I think we found a compromise. I think that we did put sort of tones of colour in, but they were still all black and white, weren't they?
Were they? I thought there was colour from the photographs.
There's
the lighting.
them, but they're like sort of, yeah, they're sort of predominant because they were etched. The whole idea was that they were sort of, which was, again, that's where they I remember painting that set. You've just reminded me now. That's in terms of, sort of. I remember being at Hackney
That's
Empire.
in terms of being controlling, Liam.
Yeah. But it was like, it was all cross hatching, and somebody was doing. I was going, no, and it was. I remember being there at sort of midnight or something, sort of cross hatching all this set with them.
You're a devil. You're a devil. But the results are wonderful, I have to say. And you've worked with, I think, probably a different designer on each show that you've done with us. Anna Fleischler did the Britain, the Bunyan.
Chloe did Magic Flute.
Chloe did Magic Flute. Chloe Lampard, who's now so famous, none of us can touch her or go near her. Anna likewise.
Anna's the same, yeah. Anna did Paul Bunyan
Well, tell me, just to go back, sorry, so because this is very private, you and I reminiscing over the real pleasures of working beside you for me. If I were to think of in this last 18 years, what has been a pleasure, it's been working beside you, as well as, working with singers that I've loved working with. But it's rare you work beside a director that you feel, if you had a problem, you could just tell them, that help you in a humorous and generous way, not a one-upping kind of way, and would be honest with each other, but also give each other enough room to, to assume that we were going in the right place, even though it looked like muck that day, and to commiserate over the days when absolutely nothing works. But anyhow, I want to go back to the beginning. Liam, tell me, I'm really interested in how people come to be the people they are, how they, it's all choice. We're all responsible for who we are. We make choices. But to make that choice to be a performer, to make shows, to represent your experience on stage, how did that come about? Was there someone who made you feel that was possible for you? Was there someone who encouraged you?
It was like one of those sort of bizarre stories. It's like, at school, I'm from Grimsby. Sort of my parents live on a council estate in Grimsby. They still live there. So it's like no, it's not a sub story at all, but no money growing up, and the arts were not part of my life at all. I went to a comprehensive school on a very rough estate, and I worked hard. But all my subjects, I did sciences, so in terms of your calculus thing as a polymath, I could probably do that as well. So I did and all my A levels were sciences. I did physics, biology, maths. The only one I ever did was art. I really enjoyed painting and drawing. When in my upper sixth, my friend, I had a couple of friends. There was a theatre at my school. They did do theatre, drama, but it was never part of my experience. And my best friend was doing her A-level theatre studies, and she needed someone to do a duologue with. And so I did. She asked me if I'd do Richard III with her, and I was like, yeah, okay. So she was doing Lady Anne, obviously, and I did the duologue from Richard III. And in the audience was this woman who came up to talk to me afterwards, and she said, "What drama school are you going to?" And I was like, "Well, I'm not." I said, I'm going to study medicine. I've got a place at Nottingham University. I'm going to study medicine." And she was like, "Oh," she said, "have you never wanted to do theatre?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'd love to, but it's not really a career." And she went, will you come and see me at my house?" And I was like, "Okay." Her name was Mrs. Smith. To this day, I don't know her first name. She was probably in her 60s, I would think. So I went round to her house, and she had this room. It's like sort of probably about half the size of my living room, and it was full, wall to wall books. And she said, "Would you read this for me?" And it was like a poem, probably. And then she said, "Read this," and it was a bit of Shakespeare or something. And in that afternoon, she basically changed my life and said, "I'd love to work with you. I'd love to sort of come and for you to come and visit me each week, and I'd love to work with you." And I was like, and she was like, at the time, we didn't sort of have drama. It was like she did speech and elocution. That's not what she was doing with me. It was very much sort of lambda speech and lambda sort of acting and speech things that she was interested in. So, and even at that time, we're talking 80s, she used to charge about £15 an hour, which was because it was basically she was sort of teaching all the public school boys and stuff. And I was like, there's no way. I was working in a paper shop on a Sunday. That was like the only money I had coming in. And she said, "I'll charge you £1. Just come." I said, "Okay." And so every Friday afternoon, I'd go and see her, and I'd read. Her husband would bring in chocolate cake and tea, and we'd just talk and read, and I'd go home with a pile of books. And after about 4 weeks, I was like, this is what I need to do. So I frantically applied to drama schools and some degree courses as well. I got in at 2 drama schools and Newcastle, and I went and did theatre at Newcastle. That was my...
Liam,
because of her.
do you still bless Mrs. Smith, or do you think, God Almighty, why did she take me away from medical school?
Over this COVID thing, I've been thinking I should be there, sort of helping. Yeah, and if we never work again, if this never, I might be going back a career change. I don't think I'll make it as a doctor, but I might I have been sort of looking at ambulance drivers and paramedics and stuff. Going, I've still got my first aid skills there.
Let's come back to looking at COVID. Liam, has it ever occurred to you to make a piece about your afternoons with Mrs. Smith?
No, not yet. No.
I think you should. I don't know what form it should take, but people like Mrs. Smith they're incredible, aren't they?
Yeah.
Like they notice things in people and leave a legacy.
Yeah. She has no idea, I don't think, that what effect, and I'm sure she can't be alive now. She'd be, but her daughter was a dancer with the Royal Ballet. I know that as well. She wasn't at the time because she was gone into teaching, but she had been a dancer with the Royal Ballet, and even when I was at university, my mum worked in Sainsbury's on the checkout in Sainsbury's, and she used to come and do her shopping there, and used to sort of ask how I was getting on and stuff. So it was like, yeah, incredible. Those people in your life that changed the whole direction of your life. Really, he was one of them.
That's extraordinary. I find that so beautiful, and there are plenty of Mrs. Smiths who I don't know if they're the same. You know, I'm not saying they're all the same, but who take an interest in someone. And when you're young, if some adult takes an interest in you and sees who you are and something special in you, my God, it makes you glow. It's such a wonderful feeling. I mean, I came from a very big family, and we had zero money, and well, not zero, but we didn't have, you know, it was a big family, and my father worked, and that was. But I remember once my great uncle, well, he wasn't either that, he was my dead grandmother's first cousin, just sent me a letter with a check in it saying, he was a priest, saying, I came across this money lately, and I think you've a hunger to study. And it was $250. And that was a lot then. I never had money. But just an adult taking an interest in you. I mean, this is nothing like your story, because it wasn't like Father Jim, as he was called, I was named after him, recognized something in me. But I think these stories are important to inspire people to share something about life with younger people when there's an opportunity there.
Oh my God, I even like now, if I ever get sort of young people write to me as students and stuff like that, and saying, and I would never ever turn down trying to help someone in terms of that, a young person that's like, just whether it's like meet for a coffee and talk about how they can get into the business, or struggling, or having someone in a rehearsal room if opportunity arises. I think it's so important.
I mean, balancing your rigor, Liam, you are a very compassionate person. You know, you're rigorous in rehearsal, but I don't think anyone doubts your compassion. So the rigor is not upsetting, you know, and also you've got a blooming sense of humor. So that manages it. I want to ask you about working with singers, because you've done an awful lot of work in music colleges as well. And how, just in shorthand, what are the differences between working with actors, working with dancers, and working with singers?
Hold that thought. I just realised my battery's going to go, and I don't want to cut off halfway through. So forgive me, Bradley. Cover Bradley while I plug my...
I can cover, because I can say the kind of things that I mentioned to directors who haven't worked in opera before. The first thing I say is that you're used to controlling duration, you know, because for all that people who direct straight theatre will tell you that, oh, there's a beat in the language, it has a prescribed length. That's a load of old nonsense. They can have silences, they can slow down, speed up, they control duration. And duration, after all, is meaning. And in opera, the director has no control over duration. That is in the hands of the composer. So it's on the page, the duration. So you're figuring out what works with a prescribed duration. That is an utterly different way of making things than working, you know. Very often, I don't know if you know this, but many dance theater pieces are created without music, and the music is added afterwards. Not always, but that is quite common, particularly in people who now use text. And in what we call straight theatre, that is to say prose theatre, duration is completely in the hands of the director. I mean, they start doing all this nonsense with soundtracks, for which I feel they should be taken out and shot. Not that I have any opinions about anything at all, but if I hear another big thing about doors closing and winds blowing and on echoes starting at some of our fine, intensively subsidized theatres in London, I will propose there should be a moratorium on such nonsense, and we should look back to actors to create the sense of where we are. But Liam, you were about to tell me something before I opined.
The difference, I think, I've never sort of thought about it as difference, because I think ultimately I'm fascinated by where they all meet. That, as you know, as a performer, all of them have the same tools, which is your body, your voice, and your imagination. And for me, it's about using, so in any of those three situations, one might take priority to some extent, but all of them, I think I utilize all of them in all productions that I do to some extent. Even it's like I have a big thing in terms of sort of physical theatre, and I'm often, because of my background, and I often sort of go and work with directors or actors and stuff, and to asked about physical theatre. And for me, it's like I hate the term physical theatre, because all theatre is physical. If you're standing still, that's still a physical statement.
That's the hardest thing.
Yeah. There is no such thing. It's become this sort of bastardized terms, and people stick a forward roll in or a cartwheel and go, we're doing physical theatre now. It's like, no.
Oh God, such nonsense.
Yeah. So I think and sort of talking about it from the world of opera, I think and Bradley, you can chip in whenever you want. It's that thing about, I love to, no, it's not I love, because that sounds sort of sadistic, push people out of their comfort zone, but I love to push people to beyond their expectations of themselves. I think that's it, and support them, like you said, within that if people don't think they can do something, I'll go, you absolutely, and you can see that very early on in terms of, I think because of my physical background or that sort of polymath thing, you can go, that person's got something that they can really move. They've never used it, but they can really move. Or that person needs guidance in terms of being in their body, but or they move too much and they need stillness in that. So for me, it's always a case of, and I remember sort of Country Matters, for me, that first one, going, I didn't know the rules. It's that thing about, I don't know what the rules of opera are. It's like I'd seen opera, and the one thing that I always hated about opera was the sort of park and bark mentality, that in terms of, it's like, come down front, start, and it was like, so I was determined to go, what I said to you before, like I wanted to create something and bring my skills to, I guess, which was that sort of level of physicality and life. But yeah,
I don't think you pushed Bradley out of his comfort zone. I think you just you opened the door, and he said, "Oh, great! I can go into my comfort zone."
I will never forget
in patience. Isn't that true? I mean, it was everything you wanted in a production, Bradley, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I don't know whether I fully knew that I wanted it when we started. I think that doing Patience definitely freed me up even more. But then the way that it developed, I sort of was like, oh my goodness, this is the best thing ever. And everything was led by the physicality of the character. And but there were some really grueling bits. But I think particularly the duet with Grosvenor, which was with Ross Ramgobin.
Ross did, like, we're just like,
yeah, it was relentless. And but the great thing was, you were saying about supporting us, you might have been internally frustrated, but you never lost it with us for not getting it. We'd just do it, and I think because you could see that we were doing it out of the room, we were practicing, and then I think everybody found their own physical space with that. But in Skiki, even more so, that every single person, I think, found something different physically about themselves. But I loved Patience. It was just such a fun, great show to be on.
It's the best of Gilbert and Sullivan, I think.
It's what you were saying as well, though, James. Like, as I was putting my battery in, it's that thing about being led by the music. That, in terms of, as I say, I'm in no way an opera aficionado, but like I will listen and listen to over and over again. And even with Gilbert and Sullivan, you just go, it's a form. It's like there is a form there that you can't. It's a bit like there's a musicality. The musicality of it, and it would be the same as sort of doing an Alan Bennett. Alan Bennett has a rhythm to his plays, to the way he writes, that you cannot go against. It's like it's there, and that's where the humour sits. And it's the same with sort of Gilbert and Sullivan in that music. That music absolutely guides you, and choreographically, physically, and intentionally. It's like you can't. And if you start fighting it, then you're on a loser.
Tell me, Liam, did you ever get an opera that ultimately, to direct or choreograph or whatever, that in the end didn't speak to you?
Marriage of Figaro.
Now connected to Seller's iPhone.
Hello.
Yeah, Marriage of Figaro. I did it at Opera Holland Park, and I think it didn't speak to me. I struggled with it, and it's interesting. It's like to some extent, I struggle with Mozart. I think I find it hard to connect to. I find him hard to connect to, and I think Marriage of Figaro is like ultimately going. I don't find it funny, and if you don't find it funny personally, it's really hard to make something funny. And I think ultimately, looking back on it, those sorts of things, it's like it's very easy to sort of come out with something to try and. It's like it felt easy. It didn't, and I was like, if I'd had, and it was, I think, to do something like that really well, you need a really long rehearsal period because it's a farce, and farce is difficult to do, and it needs absolute precision and timing, and that's what makes it funny.
And then I think the difficulty is the music is not the music for a farce.
Yeah,
they're quite different. I mean, in all of their collaborations, Da Ponte and Mozart are on completely different pages.
yeah,
and yet the difference between them makes the pieces that I think they are masterpieces.
Oh, you've frozen again.
I think that what's really tough is that out of every 10 interventions you may try to make, only one will work. And you've got to have the time to fail 9 times to get towards something that's honest. And yeah, they're not hilarious. I don't know. People laugh at the Marriage of Figaro every time Carabino's in the chair. They just wet themselves over that, no matter how many times they've seen it, because it's a very good dramatic construction. The play is good.
Yeah.
Opera is no farce. The opera, like, I don't know, I think all of Mozart, I don't know, people say all kinds of things about him personally. I'm not interested in his biography. I think he loves women very, very profoundly. I'm not saying he's a rampant heterosexual or anything like that, but he loves women. He loves Susanna and the Countess for all their flaws. And every conflict in a Mozart and Da Ponte opera is a conflict between men.
Yeah, yeah.
And one gets so caught up in, I can't tell you the number. I mean, you'd be better on Don Giovanni. It's more your piece. But it's an absolute minefield because it is not what anybody thinks it is. Nobody. They all think it's a great drama. It's so badly constructed. It's falling on itself. But there is something full of life and energy, and it isn't Giovanni. I don't know. I can't tell you the number of directors that have come into the room. You wouldn't have. Starting to tell me about Giovanni's attractive, this, that, and blah, 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 and I think he's a vacuum. Everything rushes into a vacuum. He's a moral void. To the audience in the 18th century, he would have been repellent.
Yeah.
He's Lucifer. But any old time, another subject.
Actually, Paul Bunyan was a struggle.
Yeah. Well, that's a dog.
Yeah.
You made something of it, but it's a dog.
But it felt like I was grappling with something the whole time, because it's like you're just going, what is this piece about in terms of what is it trying to say? and it was like, and I'm a great, like you, I'm sure, like I do a lot of reading around, and I do sort of reading around the period. I'll read about Britain, I'll read about sort of do all that thing and go, and this whole sort of conscious subjectiveness and going to America and wanting to do American musicals and stuff like that. But it felt like it's all gone, yeah, and I've tried to put it all into one piece.
And he was a great server of text, and of course the text is very particular in Paul Bunyan. That the sentimentality of the narrator, if viewed without irony, it's quite difficult to stomach, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. Though I did get to spend an afternoon in what's his name's house.
Yes, that wonderful man who did it for us as a favor.
Yeah,
Christopher, he's the most famous actor ever.
Damien Lewis.
Damien Lewis, well done.
So nice of him to do it because he's a friend of mine. And he did a really great job, better than any other narrator that I've ever, for sure. Yeah, it's a difficult. It's poetry, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
It's poetic, and it doesn't hang together. It has to have that license to be separate.
Episodes, quite sort of big things happen, and then it's like, and you don't follow a particular. You've got Inkslinger that you're sort of following, but then you go to hell, and as in whatever the character Hellsman.
Hellsman, yeah.
Yeah, you're sort of doing this with different characters.
Yeah.
But I think the thing with our Bunyan was really that, and I think it's very similar to the Skiki production that you did as well, Liam. It only really worked because it was a group of people who were a real company that really bought into you and to the idea. And I think Patience to an extent, but it's not as much of a company piece, but the soloist and chorus. But with Skiki, I just remember that whenever we started, we were like, right, let's do this. And we really wanted it to be perfect. I remember Clarissa coming off stage, if she'd been 1 nanosecond out on a movement, she'd be like, I could have done it right, and it was just so great. And we'd have our little like dance calls or whatever in the orchestra rehearsal. But it was, I think that feeling of company is something that really matters with you.
Absolutely. It's that thing about, and I think however, it's ensemble. I like to try and create an ensemble in every company that I work with, that everyone invests in that piece, however small your part or however big your part. It's like you're all part of that same company. And I think it works to its best when they are ensemble pieces like Skiki. And I think we achieved it with Paul Bunyan as well.
And flute, I think.
Yeah.
But you were such a devil. Because I remember telling you, of course, all directors are so selective in what they listen to when you first saw. I remember telling you that we were doing this horrendously challenging piece in King Priam in that season, and the chorus was really dominant, and we were doing magic flute, and that absolutely the reason why Paul Bunyan was chosen was because it was one small scene after another with small groups of people, and so that we would be able to rehearse properly all the big chorus scenes in the other 2 shows. You're such a devil, because you came along and then said, oh, well, I feel everyone has to be on stage all the time. And I remember saying to you, well, no, Liam, no, that can't happen. And it was like my worst nightmare, because I've heard that so many times from people. Oh, I want everyone on stage all the time. It's a repertory company. That's not happening. And it's not on the page. And I remember saying to you over and over, that's not happening, because, there's some poor divil who's got a mind-blowing cover role in King Priam and is doing a lead role in Magic Flute. And he's got a tiny little role in Paul Bunyan, and you want him to be on stage all the time. You devil! But then again, you're so blooming charming, and everybody wanted to be in your rehearsals rather than the other ones. I mean, it'd break a man's heart.
But we did it.
We did do it. Yeah, there was a fair bit of grief on the way, but we did do it. It's true. In that very cold space, it's freezing. And then you kept wanting to rehearse in the very biggest room that had absolutely no heating.
Yeah, well, yes, because we needed the height, because we got those bunk beds. And
Yeah, didn't need them, had them. But it was great. You did a marvelous job, and I envy you the way you just get everybody rolling with you. It's a great skill. I'm going to ask you now, so that you don't. I'll spare your blushes. You've worked as a collaborator a lot with other directors. Particularly, I think you've worked with Tim Sheeder quite a lot
Yeah.
at Regent's Park, and probably lots of other people. And you were very influential at Frantic Assembly, very influential at Cushcame, an Irish dance theatre, or I don't know what they call it. They probably call it physical theatre, dance company, I would say. So you worked in collaboration with people a lot. So you've been in a lot of rooms, and I'm going to ask you a silly question, but what are the qualities that make good theatre happen?
Ooh, bloody hell.
In a directing, choreographing, creating team. I mean, everyone's creative. They're not the only creatives in the room. But what are the qualities that you would say, consistently in my work with X, there was this quality in the room that enabled good work to happen?
I think it's sort of what I was saying to you. I think how we achieve it, but it's always allowing people to fail. Because if you create an environment where people feel they're allowed to fail, then they will go beyond their capabilities, and that includes me, sort of as a creative within that. That you have to take risks, and the moment we feel completely safe and it's easy, then I'll always question, oh, am I just taking the easy option here? So I'm not saying it has to be painful and a struggle and that time, but I think all the time it's like we have to go, let's just push itself out. I read it like the most beautiful thing. Scott Graham, who runs Frantic Assembly, he had an interview in the Stage recently because it was like the anniversary of the company, and with Lynn Gardner, and Lynn asked him who has influenced you most, and he said it was me, and that was like, it was really, but it was like, and he said because and I wish I could remember the quote now, but it was like he's someone that always says, can this be better, and can we make this better? And I think that's that, and I think that's always a thing that I have in my head, and I know that's probably something else that drives you mad about me. It's that thing about but if we just change that now, and
Oh yes.
yeah. I think that's always a thing for me, and I think it's partly to do with the background in devising as well, where you're creating work, having that sort of experience of devising work where it's never finished. So it's that thing about constantly we can keep, and that's it's interesting with like people like Simon McBurney and Complicity and other people I've worked with, where it's like you change it, you keep developing it. Nothing's and the people I admire most as theatre makers, like Page and people like that make pieces over years, and you see a piece at the beginning and it's 9 hours long, and then you see it again 4 years later and it's 3.5 hours long, and everything's been honed down, but it's like to the point where it's like a soup, and you boil it away to its goodness.
Who are they making that work for, Liam?
Who are we making it for?
No, who are they making that work for that can be made over years, and it could be 9 hours and then 3 hours? Because I'm being a bit contrary here, but it's a very privileged position
Completely.
to be able to do that. And it's for international festival audiences.
Yeah. And
it's for each other, for other people in the business. That's what actually, when I go to La Page now, I just think, oh no, all this distillation is now become, well, I think it's become self-reflective. I don't find my way in to it.
It's been a few years since I've seen him.
There's a question here I want to ask you. Oh, I'm sorry, my connection's gone a bit funny.
We lost you, but you're back.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. The question is, you see, I have a feeling that, well, my modest experience with singers suggests that you get to a point where your intervention is only to reflect them. So, in terms of changing right up to the last minute, because I hear a lot about this from singers, a lot about how bewildering that is and unhelpful that is. And then others who really like it. Because it's not an unconducted experience, it's a conducted experience. And once the orchestra arrives, there is a very different, endless direction going on. It's such a particular process when people come already knowing it.
Yeah, and I think that's been a sort of real revelation to me in terms of letting go. I think in terms of working in opera, I remember the first ever stage and orchestra I did, and it was like, what do you mean I have to sit at the back and just be quiet? That's, what do you mean?
And I had told you in advance, but you didn't hear me.
And actually, I really enjoy stage and orchestras now. In terms of, it's that thing about watching singers. It's like exactly what you just said. Take control of something and take it to another level. So the work that we've done in a rehearsal room, you see them take that work, and then it's like with the conductor, with Michael especially, like then seeing them take it to that other level and just embodying the music with that. And I find, now it's one of my favourite times to sit at the back of an auditorium and just watch the conductor work with the singers and just,
Our audience may not know that that's a sort of rule in opera, that once the orchestra arrives, the director has to take a back seat. Often it's quite convenient because you're very involved in the lighting design at that stage. And the last stages of design, because the set and costume or designer, whether or not they're separate people or one, you'll never find them hardly at a lighting call. They're upstairs sewing up a hem or looking at something with costumes or props or painting something. So having had all these discussions for months on end, the director is very often sitting beside the lighting designer, trying not to betray the original vision of the design, because usually at model box stage, there's quite a lot of lighting decided. Once it's decided what color you paint the set, you're already thinking of, and all the lamps and the gels nowadays with these things that can be any color in the world. There's no artistry to it, but those things are chosen long in advance. So you're trying to design, and you're also trying not to betray an idea of design that you shared. At least I am. I'm very conscious of that, because I had one bad experience in my life when a lighting set and costume designer didn't come to the tech rehearsals because they got a film and they could make a lot of money. And then afterwards saw the show and actually tried to take me to court for having betrayed the original vision that we had shared. I just fear that we hadn't shared it, for our mutual fault, because I had no desire to betray. But anyway, there is a kind of order to that release. I can understand your pleasure in it now, because I just think singers often work best if you work them really hard early on, and then you don't ask them to improvise. Not many people. Some people who like to improvise, but not many. And then you let them grow. You try anyway. And you let the ones who are not going to grow be grown around by the other green shoots.
I think particularly with the shows that we did, Liam, that there was a lot of incredibly detailed stuff in the rehearsal room, and then actually when we got on stage, it might just be tweaks or it could be tightening, but it was never new.
No, I wouldn't. Yeah, there's always that cut-off point. I always have that. Right, this is what it is in terms of that. But I think it's that thing about noting things in terms of its character things and character, and especially I'm sure on Patience, it was like intentions and those details that can make characters live.
Yeah, and patience changed so much with the audience as well.
Yeah, we suddenly discover where the laughs are, and you're going, we're missing, or where they're not laughing. Especially
Yeah, like this was hilarious in the room.
yeah,
Why is nobody laughing?
And it can just be a timing thing
Yeah.
sometimes, or a look, and you go, just make that a double take rather than just looking, and you go, that's what it is, and its own. And the difficulty is, again, often like in theatre, one of the questions you were asking earlier on, James, you'll have like a week of previews probably at least, or in something like when we were working on Company, we had like 3 weeks, a month of previews where we're still detailing stuff and changing it and refining it. Whereas, with opera, it's a case of you're on.
This is it.
You're on.
Yeah.
Right, I'm going to come in here just to say if anyone has any questions from the floor, please do put it in the chat. I've actually found the stage article, so now I'm prepared to be embarrassed, Liam. But with Scott Graham, and it's a great quote. It says, "Who or what was your biggest influence?" And it says, "Theatre director and choreographer Liam Steele has been a huge inspiration. I love his tenacity and invention. He has taught me to look at any situation and ask if it can work better." So it was in essence what you said. And I have a little personal story actually about Liam, that it was, I only realized this when we were in the rehearsal room. And I think you were talking to Ross Ramgobin, who played Grosvenor. This was either at the end of the day or just before lunch. And you were talking about this play called Hymns by Chris O'Connell. And I just heard it out of the corner of my ear and thought, weird, I saw Hymns when I was doing my A-levels, and I did my coursework on it. And then sort of I came into the conversation and said, "Oh my God, Hymns, what, the Frantic Assembly one?" And you were like, "Yeah." And I said, "That was extraordinary," and it was this really amazing sort of weird connection. But yeah, I loved it. I loved that play, and it was just lovely then to come sort of full circle, if you like, that then we were working together on a show, which was great.
Those are exactly what you're saying about sort of the influence people have in our lives that we don't realise, especially work that we make. I worked with someone recently who had seen Knots, the piece I made for Cush Kane that you were talking about.
I saw that.
And he said, like, I've still got the poster on my wall at home. She said, that show was the reason I got into theatre. She said, I saw that, she said, and she went, this is what I want to do with my life. And we don't think about that. We don't think, you struggle in a rehearsal room in terms of, and exactly that thing about who do we make work for. And when you hear something like that, you sort of go, my Lord, underestimate sometimes the power that a show can have.
Before we just do the questions, which I want us to do, I just want Liam, can you just, for our friends who are with us, can you succinctly say what COVID has meant for freelance artists like you?
Insecurity, fear. It's really scary. It's been a really scary time. I was in New York at the time. We were sort of opening Company on Broadway, and we'd done like 10 days of previews, and we were. It was. I remember distinctly because it was the 12th of March. I came back on the 13th of March, and we were opening on the 21st of March. That was the plan, and the next day it was over, and I was on the plane back to London, and I haven't had any work since. So it's a scary time, and until things change, and I think it's the insecurity of it all at the moment, and what it means. It's been a lot of sort of, for me, and I'm sure a lot of artists talking very openly, a lot of questioning about myself and about. You realise, or I've realised, how much my work, my self-worth is wrapped up in my work, and when that's taken away, what that means, and what value you have as a person. And so having to address that as a human being and go, what is my value in society? What is my value in this world? Has been, it's been sort of a difficult journey, I think. And I'm sure I'm not the only one going through that.
Is there, do you think that people are sharing this experience? Because there are, I suspect many freelance artists that I know they're worried about the rent.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You know, I've had so many friends, like designers, and performers, that have moved out of London over this period because they can't afford to live in the city anymore. You know, I've got a friend who's a designer who's like in his mid-30s, and he's had to move back home to his parents because he actually can't afford to be in London anymore. And that's scary. It's a really scary time, especially when we don't see an end to it. Like when we're actually going to get back to some sense of normality. And
thank you for sharing that with us. I'm sure it's even painful to articulate, but it's so important people know.
Yeah. And I think it's like, you know, we keep talking, there's been a lot of publicity about it in terms of freelancers and the struggle of freelancers, but I don't think people really talk about it in terms of the emotional impact and that it has on us, and the fact that, you know, being redundant is like, essentially, it's that word is such a strong word in terms of that you feel redundant suddenly, and don't have a purpose, and not valued. And even in terms of theatres, when you see, it's hard when you've got a government that actually sort of, are they really addressing this? And of course people need to be safe and people need to feel secure and all of those things, but when you see people on an aeroplane sat crowded in a space like that, but we can't be in a theatre, it sort of raises all these questions going, well, what value do we put on the arts and theatre and opera and music in our society? It's more important to go on holiday.
Yeah, it's a right. Thank you, Liam. I think we need to hear that. There need to be more sensitive things written. I read angry things, but I don't read sensitive things about people's lives. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
There is a question there. I'm preempting you, Bradley. Can you tell us any news about the autumn in that regard? Yes, I can tell you that we've started rehearsal already for La Voix Humaine. And next Monday, we start very intensive music rehearsals for all the rest of these. We don't know anything. I have to say, I had a meeting with people the other night who were asking me, I think it was last night. I was so miserable afterwards because they were asking me all these questions. What about this? What about that? What about that? When this? And I was saying, I'm so tired of saying I don't know. Can I just say I'm doing my best? And I will do my best. And it will change. But we're an opera company. We get money to work with artists, to make work. We're going to do that no matter what this autumn, even if we just have to film it. And I don't mean just like film is less. We'll try to make that interesting. But we have dates now at a number of theaters, at least 6, and I'm hoping for a lot more. The people in theaters want the work, and they responded really generously to this weird program of work that I want to make. But it's no accident that it's this program of work. I want to do it. It's about performers. It's one-person shows, and it's people who have been denied a voice for the last 6 months and more. I want them to find a voice in doing what they do best. And one-person shows, often directed by other performers. Susan Bickley has just agreed to direct a Waterbird talk, which would be interesting. I don't think she's ever directed before, but she's done one-person shows, and who knows better how to do a one-person show than someone who's done one. And the programs are weird. I'm trying to what's that verb that means coerce? coerce a dancer choreographer to make a response to another piece, which is the Shostakovich settings of Marina Tsvetaeva poems, that very extraordinary poet. And I keep saying, no illustration, please. Response. And we've got great artists agreeing to work with us. And why shouldn't it be brilliant? It's fantastic stuff.
Yeah.
125, 150, 200 people that can fit into the theaters with social distancing, they are going to be folk in the world. We can make the best work for them. And
I think James's connection is getting a bit shaky. I think he was just saying that the 150, 200 people who see it are going to really see something special, because these great artists that we've got who couldn't be in the planned autumn season are going to be in this new sort of exciting autumn season. And we've got some exciting learning and participation work as well. We don't know whether we'll be able to go into schools. So the work is being planned again to be filmed, but with curriculum links and ways of making that interactive. So I think James has actually just gone. His connection must have gone. But you know, we're really trying our best to bring things out to you this autumn. But it's been such a pleasure to see you, Liam, and thank you so much for chatting. I have to say that Patience, I think, is my number one sort of experience as a performer. It was just wonderful. So this is our last in conversation for the moment. We'll be back when we can talk a little bit more firmly about dates for this autumn season. And I hope you have a lovely evening. It's been so wonderful spending these 12 weeks with you. See you all soon. Bye.
Thank you, Bradley.
Thanks, Liam. Bye.